People say you've got to raise your voice to make a difference, that if you aren't loud, you'll get overlooked or pushed aside. But what if I told you the exact opposite is true? The most powerful people aren't shouting to be heard. They're quietly controlling the conversation without ever raising their voice. This idea isn't new. The ancient Stoics understood that true strength isn't about volume, but about calm control and clear thinking. Today, we're exploring how embracing silence can totally change the way others see you, helping you earn respect without ever needing to demand it. Let's dive into why the quietest voices are often the ones we listen to most closely. Rule 1. Control how people see you. You walk into any crowded social event, a business meeting, or even a friendly gathering, and you immediately notice something interesting happening. Everyone's competing to speak louder, fighting for attention, desperate to assert their presence. It's like everyone's trying to outshine each other with noise, volume, speed. Words fly, opinions clash, voices overlap. You can practically feel the tension in the air, not from what's being said, but from the underlying need to be noticed. It's like everyone's performing instead of participating. But here's a thought. Does making noise truly command respect, or does it simply broadcast insecurity? The Stoics had an answer for this long ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Think about that. In a world that constantly tells you to shout louder, move faster, and hustle harder, there's something quietly revolutionary about staying composed. Because real power doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't need approval. It sits still and lets the world come to it. It speaks less and listens more. It doesn't compete for attention. It draws attention without trying. Now let's bring this down to something familiar. Think about a typical day at your office. You're in a team meeting filled with chaotic chatter. Everyone wants their ideas heard first. There's this frantic energy as people try to cut each other off, talk over one another, or drop buzzwords like confetti. Everyone's convinced that being loud equals being smart, that talking fast equals thinking fast. But now imagine you're the calm one in that storm. You lean back, quietly attentive, not rushing or reacting impulsively. While others broadcast their insecurities with noise, your silence subtly signals strength. This is the difference between needing to be noticed and knowing you will be. And that shift, it's not just about tone, it's about self-awareness. Aristotle famously noted, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." When you truly know your worth, you don't feel the need to put it on display. You don't waste energy trying to outshine everyone else in the room. You wait, you watch, you think. And when the noise dies down, when the moment opens up, then you speak. And when you do, your words land with precision. They're thoughtful, relevant, and impactful. You didn't speak to fill space. You spoke to fill a gap. You didn't need to shout or interrupt. Instead, you allowed everyone else to exhaust themselves, waiting patiently for the moment when your contribution would be unmistakably valuable. And in that moment, everything shifts. As Carl Jung insightfully remarked, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And in this quiet act, you've done exactly what matters, demonstrating value rather than merely promising it. You become the one they listen to, not because you demanded it, but because your presence already spoke for you. This isn't manipulation, it's mastery. The mastery of perception, of timing, and most importantly, self-control. When everyone else is driven by impulse, the one who holds their fire becomes the most dangerous person in the room. That's not about playing games. It's about playing on a level most people haven't even trained for. And it's rooted in one powerful truth. Restraint isn't weakness. It's focus. It's discipline. It's knowing you don't have to act on every impulse just because it's there. Socrates emphasized, "To find yourself, think for yourself." Today, this advice might mean resisting the impulse to follow the noisy crowd. Just because everyone else feels the urgency to prove their worth doesn't mean you have to play the same desperate game. The louder the environment, the more valuable silence becomes. The more voices competing for attention, the more your quiet presence stands out. True respect is never demanded. It's naturally given to those who embody quiet confidence and authentic self-assurance. You don't have to declare your power, you show it by how little you chase recognition. When you understand that silence can speak volumes, you transform the way people see you, without ever needing to raise your voice. So, in your next meeting, resist the urge to jump in immediately. Let the noise unfold around you and use this time to quietly assess the conversation. Pay attention not just to what's being said, but how it's being said. Watch the dynamics, read the room. Let people reveal their motives through their words. Wait patiently. When the right moment arises, and you'll feel it instinctively, speak calmly and clearly. Watch what happens. Your words will carry a kind of gravity the others don't, not because you're louder, but because you chose your moment. And that moment wasn't taken, it was earned. When that happens, people start looking at you differently. They start leaning in. They start anticipating your insights. You've shifted from being just another voice in the crowd to becoming a powerful presence in the room. You didn't force it. You didn't sell it. You simply embodied it. Rule 2. Let them underestimate you. There's a rare kind of presence that doesn't need to beg for the spotlight. You've seen it, maybe at a party, in a meeting, or during a moment when the pressure is thick in the air. Everyone's scrambling to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. They're listing off achievements, cracking jokes, talking over each other. And yet, there's one person sitting quietly, almost invisible. They're not the loudest. They're not trying to impress anyone, but you feel them in the room. Not because they demand attention, but because they're too grounded to chase it. That person carries something different, a kind of calm energy that says, "I don't need to prove myself to you because I already know who I am." It's subtle, but magnetic. While everyone else performs, this individual is simply present. They observe, they take mental notes, they absorb the dynamics. They listen with intention, not just to reply, but to truly understand. And when they finally speak or act, it cuts through the noise like a blade. Not with volume, with precision. That's not weakness. That's what the Stoics called strategic humility, power wrapped in patience, confidence expressed in composure. You see, we've been taught to believe that confidence has to look a certain way, big energy, loud statements, fast talk. But real confidence, the unshakable kind, is often quiet. It doesn't flex. It doesn't brag. It doesn't rush to defend itself. In fact, it's usually the ones making the most noise who are hiding the most fear. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's exactly why the most quietly confident people don't chase applause. They've already done the hard work of accepting themselves. They're not looking to be approved by the room. They've already approved of themselves, and that gives them a kind of freedom most people never experience. The beauty of that kind of self-possession is that it's often underestimated. Quiet confidence doesn't draw immediate attention, and that's exactly what makes it so effective. While everyone else is broadcasting, you're studying. While they're pushing, you're positioning. And when the right opportunity appears, you don't need to announce yourself, you just act. And the room notices. Think of sports. It's not always the player who's shouting at teammates or pounding their chest after a play that changes the game. It's the one who's watching everything, silently scanning for patterns, anticipating moves 2 steps ahead. They don't force their presence, they pick their moment. The aggressive ones? They're loud, yes, but they're also predictable, easy to read. The quiet one? They're dangerous because they're unreadable. And as Plato put it, courage is knowing what not to fear. The silent strategist knows that being underestimated isn't a setback, it's an advantage. In real life, that kind of subtlety works in your favor. Being underestimated buys you time. It gives you space to move freely without pressure. It disarms people. They open up. They let things slip. And all the while you're collecting data. You're learning how the room works, how people operate, where the weaknesses lie. Seneca, another Stoic mind, once said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Most people never learn that balance. They speak just to fill silence. But you let silence serve you. You begin to see restraint not as passivity, but as a sharpened form of control. Real composure isn't about holding back because you're afraid. It's about holding back because you're planning. And the longer you wait, the more precise your action becomes. That's not inaction. That's intentional patience. Now think of those who stand still when the world's moving fast. They aren't frozen, they're grounded. They're not afraid of being overlooked because they know how temporary attention is. They're building something bigger than a moment. Aristotle once said, "Character is revealed when pressure is applied." And there's no greater character test than staying composed while everyone around you scrambles for recognition. We live in a culture obsessed with being seen. Post your wins, list your accolades, make sure everyone knows how smart, busy, or successful you are. But Socrates had a better idea. Be as you wish to seem. Stop performing and start becoming. Don't tell the world what you're building. Let the results make the announcement. Don't fight to be noticed. Focus on being undeniable. Quietly, strategically, fully. You don't need to dominate the conversation to own the room. Let others have the mic. Let them do the dance. You're not on trial. You're not here to win their approval. You're here to understand the terrain, watch the plays unfold, and make your move when it matters most. Let them misjudge you. Let them overlook you. That's not your burden. That's your edge. While others are broadcasting their plans, you're already in motion. While they're chasing validation, you're building leverage. And when it's time to move, you don't announce it. You just do it. Cleanly, powerfully, quietly. And when that moment hits, everything shifts. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence commanded it. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's design. That's what happens when silence meets strategy. When ego steps aside and purpose takes the lead. When you stop trying to be impressive and start being effective. Rule 3. Win the situation, not the argument. It starts small, a disagreement, a misinterpretation, maybe even a harmless joke that lands the wrong way. You feel the heat rise in your chest, your heartbeat quicken, words rush to your mouth before you've had the chance to think them through. Suddenly, voices are raised, egos flare, and you find yourself in a shouting match with someone you were laughing with 5 minutes ago. You walk away with a sore throat, a clenched jaw, and absolutely no progress. Just distance. Sound familiar? That's because most arguments aren't about resolution. They're about self-preservation. Once pride walks in, understanding quietly walks out. We've all been conditioned to believe that being right is the goal. That if you can out-talk, outwit, or out-volume the other person, you've won. But what exactly have you won? The conversation may end, but the relationship suffers. Respect suffers. And perhaps, most importantly, you suffer too, because the version of yourself that needed to win forgot to listen. The Stoics warned us about this centuries ago. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, Realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In simpler terms, no one can drag you into a fight unless you let them. You always have a choice: react or reflect, escalate or observe. Arguments become traps not because of the topics, but because of the energy we bring to them. Let's say a friend says something you strongly disagree with. Politics, religion, pineapple on pizza, whatever hits your nerve. Your first impulse might be to fire back, to correct them, to educate them. But that impulse? That's your ego. That's not wisdom. Pause for a second and ask yourself, am I trying to be right, or am I trying to understand? Because when you attack, they defend. And once someone shifts into defense mode, they stop hearing you. Their walls go up. The truth can't reach them through barbed wire. Now flip the script. Instead of reacting, lean into curiosity. Ask questions, not sarcastically, but sincerely. Make space, not arguments. Carl Jung once said, "Thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge." And he was right. Changing your mind is hard. It's uncomfortable. So when you create a safe space for someone to think, not to defend, but to actually think, you give them the chance to reconsider. That's how people grow. Not through confrontation, but through reflection. That's influence. Not power over someone, but power with them. Socrates understood this long before any of us. His entire method, what we now call the Socratic method, was built on asking the right questions, not giving the right answers. He didn't shout people down. He didn't crush them with rhetoric. He simply asked, listened, and guided. And in doing so, he helped people uncover their own blind spots. That's why his teachings still survive, because real wisdom doesn't force itself on others. It walks alongside them. In the moment, it might feel satisfying to raise your voice, to win the argument. But strong reactions often come at the cost of strong relationships. You might prove your point and lose the person. Aristotle said, anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. And that's the challenge. Anger isn't the enemy. Undisciplined anger is. Reaction without reflection is. Power used without purpose is. So next time you feel yourself inching toward defense mode, do the harder thing. Pause, breathe, watch your ego rise, and let it settle. Then respond, not from a place of needing to be right, but from a place of wanting to be understood. Ask the other person to share more. Ask why they believe what they believe, and really listen, not to trap them, but to understand them. The more they feel heard, the more they open up. And when they open up, there's a chance for change, not just in them, but in you too. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." That's your compass. Don't speak just to fill silence or win attention. Speak when you truly have something meaningful to add. Let your words come from clarity, not emotion, from insight, not insecurity. Because in the end, the person who can remain grounded in a room full of shouting voices, the one who speaks with calm, waits with patience, and guides with empathy, will always be the one in control, not just of the conversation, but of themselves. And that is where real power begins. Rule 4. When you act, be decisive. Some people walk through life like ripples in a pond, fluid, responsive, always adjusting to the environment, but rarely carving a path of their own. They mean well, they react quickly, but they move with uncertainty, constantly adapting rather than directing. Then there are others, people who don't rush, who don't flinch, who don't broadcast their every move. They're quiet, focused, and when they act, it's sharp, deliberate, undeniable. It's like lightning, sudden, exact, unmistakable. It cuts through everything, and for a moment, the whole landscape changes. That kind of presence isn't built on bravado, it's built on decisiveness. Not louder, just sharper. In a world that rewards instant reaction, being still is countercultural. Being precise is rare. But that's what gives it its power. Everyone's sprinting, chasing, posting, shouting. And in that chaos, the person who slows down and moves only when it matters, the one who strikes with clarity instead of noise, commands a different kind of attention. The Stoics understood this long before modern hustle culture. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." That quote hits hard because it leaves no room for dithering. Don't perform, don't preach, don't plan endlessly. Act. Let's break it down to something simple. Imagine you're holding a dry stick in your hands. If you gently push it, it bends. If you're uncertain, if you apply uneven pressure, it resists, maybe even snaps back and stings you. But if you apply a single focused burst, straight, confident and decisive, it snaps, cleanly, instantly, no resistance. That's the metaphor for effective action. Anything less is just wasted motion. It's the difference between hinting and hitting. And yet, how often do we play small? Not because we lack ability, but because we're afraid of moving too fast, of getting it wrong, of standing out too boldly. Especially in places like work. People talk about their ideas constantly, signaling how busy and driven they are, always previewing their next big move. But movement without direction is just noise. It's not impressive, it's exhausting. If you want to separate yourself, stop telling people your next step. Just take it. Build your vision in silence. Refine it while others are still discussing theirs. Then, when you reveal what you've been working on, let it be so clear, so complete, that it ends the conversation. Not because you said more, but because you delivered more. This isn't about being reckless. Decisive action isn't impulsive. It's prepared. It's thought through, but not overthought. So many people confuse motion with progress. But motion alone doesn't move you forward. Execution does. Planning without action becomes a comfort zone. It feels productive, but it's really just procrastination in disguise. Socrates, in all his wisdom, pointed out that the beginning of wisdom lies in defining your terms. Know what your target is. Don't act blindly, but don't wait endlessly for everything to feel perfect either. Clarity doesn't come from overthinking, it comes from doing. One of the biggest reasons people fail isn't because they aren't smart or skilled, it's because they hesitate, they second guess. They get stuck in what-ifs instead of creating what now. And this is where Stoicism becomes more than just a mindset. It becomes a way of moving. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Think about that. How many opportunities have you let pass because you were waiting for certainty, for the stars to align, for someone else to validate your idea? Meanwhile, someone else moved, maybe with less talent, but more intention, and they claimed the space that could have been yours. Plato said, "The beginning is the most important part of the work, not the planning, not the promise, the beginning. Because once you start, you separate yourself from the crowd." Most people never begin. They tinker, they tweak, they talk about it, but they don't launch. That's why the world respects results, not intentions. When you act with certainty, you don't need to defend your choices. Your results speak louder than any explanation ever could. So take a moment and look at your life. Pick one thing, just one, a project, a change, a decision you've been circling but haven't committed to. Be honest. What's holding you back? Fear, uncertainty, the illusion of perfect timing. Whatever it is, stop orbiting it. Step back, design a strategy, refine it privately, build it like no one's watching. Then, when you're ready, don't creep toward the goal. Move like lightning. Speak directly. Execute cleanly. Take the space you've earned without apologizing for it. No more half steps. No more backpedaling. No more waiting to be ready. You're not supposed to feel completely ready. You're supposed to be committed. And once you move with that kind of clarity, hesitation has no room to survive. Rule 5. Master the art of psychological silence. There's a certain weight in silence that's hard to explain until you've felt it. Not the silence of awkwardness or social discomfort, not the kind that hangs heavy because no one knows what to say. This is different. This is deliberate, intentional, the kind of silence that creates space, tension, even curiosity, the kind that shifts the energy in a room without a single word. That's silence. That's power. Most of us aren't taught to trust it. We're conditioned to react, to fill the void, to respond quickly because silence feels like uncertainty. We panic when people go quiet on us. We overthink. We assume. We interpret silence as rejection or judgment because we're not used to stillness holding more meaning than noise. But the Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And what is silence if not the ultimate act of being unlike the world? The world yells. The world defends. The world fights to be heard. But the wise, they wait. They choose. Think about that one time you texted someone something real, maybe a little raw, a little exposed, and then nothing. Minutes turned into hours, and your mind turned into a maze. What are they thinking? Did I mess up? Should I have said less or more? That gap between your message and their response is where your imagination runs wild. It's proof that silence has power. Because in that space, people reveal more about themselves than they ever could in conversation. Controlled silence turns the spotlight back onto them. It makes them confront their own assumptions, their own intentions. It makes them wonder what you're thinking, when really you're just choosing not to play the game. In negotiations, this kind of silence becomes a tactical edge. Most people speak too quickly. They accept too soon. They rush to close the gap because they fear the discomfort of stillness. But you wait. You let your pause carry weight. You let it create uncertainty. That pause isn't indecision, it's leverage. It introduces doubt into the other person's mind, forcing them to fill in the blanks. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." Silence is that secret order. It rearranges the dynamic without confrontation. It reveals what rushing never could. And yet, this kind of silence takes strength, because it's not just about what you don't say, it's about what you're choosing to hold back. That requires patience, control, awareness. As Aristotle put it, patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. And silence, when practiced with intention, is one of the purest forms of patience. It's discipline in action, especially in a culture where everyone is expected to have a take, a reaction, an immediate opinion. Resisting that impulse is rare. That rarity is what gives it value. When you hold your response, especially when provoked, you shift from being reactive to being strategic. Most people operate on reflex. They react as soon as they feel something. But Stoicism teaches that strength is not found in expression, but in restraint. Strength is calm. It's the ability to observe without being pulled in. It's the decision to listen when everything inside you wants to speak. And nothing challenges others more than a silence that feels intentional. Socrates once said, "I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think." That's what silence does. It makes people think deeply, sometimes uncomfortably. You don't need to respond to every message. You don't need to justify yourself in every group chat or defend every misunderstanding. Let people wonder. Let your silence create distance between their assumption and your reality. Because what's rare becomes respected. When you choose not to speak, not to react, not to explain, you tell the world that your energy, your thoughts, your presence aren't given freely. They must be earned. Not every situation needs your voice. Some just need your presence. Let others perform. Let them chase attention. You, on the other hand, command it through stillness. Because silence, when it's not fear but focus, isn't absence. It's presence amplified. It doesn't say, I have nothing to offer. It says, I know exactly what I'm worth, and I don't give it away easily. It doesn't ask for attention, it earns it, through intention, through restraint, through the quiet certainty that says, I know who I am, I know what I carry, and I don't need noise to prove it. In a world that rewards noise, your silence can be your greatest weapon. Move with calm, speak with clarity, and let your presence do what words never could. Thank you for being part of Stoic Journal, where stillness becomes strength and thought becomes power. If this spoke to something in you, there's another video waiting that dives even deeper. It's right there on the screen. Go watch it next. And remember, we'll be here when you're ready for your next moment of clarity.